Secret School, Chapter 12. Though Ida still hadn't figured out how to be a teacher, student, family member, and herself all at the same time, she found herself truly enjoying teaching. Each time she drove to school, she looked forward to what new things would happen. As the days passed, she worked with or listened to each student separately, though there were times she worked simultaneously with two or three. When she wasn't spending time with them, the children were either learning lessons by themselves, memorizing, working with each other, studying together if they were on the same level, or helping one another if they were not. When they became tired or bored, which happened, they sat quietly staring out the windows at the mountains daydreaming. Sometimes they did little but listened to the other lessons that buzzed ceaselessly around them. Of course, there were arguments, spats, even mean words, some which brought tears. Once Herbert and Charlie even got into a fight. Everything took sorting out. Then there were the school chores: sweeping, mopping, cutting, and hauling wood, dusting, taking out ashes, polishing desks, filling the stove, cleaning the privies, washing windows. Everyone did something. But with the passing of every day, Ida felt more confident that things were going truly well. The children seemed to be working hard. She herself was not quite as exhausted as she had been. Even Herbert was in school more often than not. Maybe, after all, her visit had helped. One afternoon, as they were driving home, Felix said, "Ida, guess what Tom was talking about?" That final exam you have to take. What'd he say? Said he's going to pass it easy. Gritting her teeth, Ida said, "I hate that Tom Cole," and immediately resolved to concentrate wholly on her own studies. But as soon as she arrived home, she was greeted by her father saying, "Ida, I need you in the barn." It was lambing season, an exciting but unsettled time. Newborns had a schedule all their own. It was quite late when Ida finally crawled into her bed. She, working with her mother and father, had helped deliver 12 lambs. Spent, she lay down, only to realize she had done absolutely no schoolwork that night, neither for the students nor for herself. She sat bolt upright. She must do something. Then Felix across the room gave a deep sigh in his sleep. He sounded so content, so utterly at rest, that Ida could do nothing but give way to her own tiredness. Full of the pleasing sensation of willfully doing nothing, of being aware of nothing but her own body, she snuggled beneath her blanket. It seemed the sweetest thing in the world. In the moment she was asleep. Exactly 2 weeks after the day Miss Sedgwick had appeared, the weather turned springtime glorious. The air was balmy, with fluffy clouds floating through an arching blue sky. The mountains themselves, with their constant retreating snow caps, seemed to be snoring. Tom announced he'd seen a bald eagle on the way to school. Charlie countered by insisting he'd seen hummingbirds, the season's first. Early flowers, brilliant yellow snow lilies dotted the valley, signaling spring's late arrival and the promise of summer, wonderful summer. No one, including Ida, wanted to be inside. Still, she told herself they had to be. All that morning, Ida kept stealing glances out the open window. Once, when she noticed Ruckus grazing, she even caught herself wishing she could be a mule for the day. 4 times she quietly opened her desk drawer, pulled the sheepskin aside, and checked the clock. She wasn't tired, she was restless. The room, despite the open windows, seemed small and stuffy. When Ida caught sight of a mule deer coming down the road and trotting off into the woods, she gave up. She had to get out, too. Suddenly she said, "I wish to make an announcement." The fidgeting children gave her attention. "It's recess time, and I've decided I need recess, too. From now on I shall go outside and play when you do. When I do, I shall be Ida. But when recess is over, I will be Miss Bidson, your teacher again. May we agree on that? All in favor, raise hands." "Ida's going to be human again," Herbert shouted as he stretched both hands up. All the other hands shot up, and there was a dash for the door. Once outside, Ida didn't stop. Gathering her skirts in her hands, she ran as hard as she could, away from everyone towards the eastern hills, as if determined to reach the top of the mountain. It felt so good to run again. Then she flopped down in the tall grass, spread her arms and legs like a windmill, and gazed up at the sky. The sun was warm, the breeze in her face was fresh and clean. High above her a hawk began to circle. Ida giggled. "Maybe he thinks I'm a mouse," he thought. Suddenly consumed with a desire to play, she ran back to the schoolyard. As soon as Tom saw Ida coming, he huddled with Herbert. Then he called out, "Crack the whip! Crack the whip!" Everyone tore down behind the privies to the flat area near the pond. Once there, they all joined hands, urging Ida to be at the end. Completely giddy to be romping again, she agreed. It was Herbert who grasped her hands securely. Tom, being tallest, naturally took the lead. He led them round and round in tighter circles until Ida had a hard time staying on her feet. She didn't care. She was so happy to be part of the group again. Tom led on, faster and faster, until he made the final cracking twist. He shouted, "Let her go!" With that, Herbert let Ida's hand slip. The boys had it all perfectly planned and timed. Ida went flying through the air until she landed, with a great splosh, right in the middle of the pond. Soaked and mud splattered, she sat in the water. For a moment she just remained there, gasping for breath, shocked. The next moment she broke out in laughter, laughing as she had not laughed in a long time. As the other children joined in, she could not stop. Suddenly she heard a voice say, "My dear Miss Bidson, are you giving swimming lessons?" They looked around. It was the county examiner. She seemed to be struggling not to laugh herself. "I have visited many a school," she said, "but never one like this. Now, I'm afraid I really do need to speak to you all." Dripping wet, red-faced and mud-streaked, Ida waded out of the pond and plodded in sodden shoes toward the schoolhouse. The other children followed uncertainty. Tom edged up to Ida. "Sorry," he whispered. She looked at him. He looked so pathetically guilty that for a moment she almost felt an irrepressible giggle rising. "Do I look a sight?" He hesitated for a moment, then said yes, and he started to laugh again but tried to repress it. Ida bit her lip to keep herself from laughing more. As the students filed into their places, Ida stood shivering behind the teacher's desk. This was, she knew, a very serious moment. Why, then, was she so desperate to laugh? "My dear," said Miss Sedgwick, "have you no dry clothes?" "No, ma'am." "Can I explain what we were? Miss Bidson, you are the teacher here. Do take your place." Wet though she was, Ida sat down. Under the cover of her desk, she slipped off her shoes. She was aware that if she so much as peeked as at Tom, she would burst out laughing again. "I'm so sorry to have come at such an awkward moment," Miss Sedgwick began, addressing Ida as well as the class. "I should begin by commending you all for your desire to be in school. As far as I am concerned, there's no harm in your studying together. In fact, I greatly admire it. If you wish to allow Miss Bitson to be your unofficial teacher, there's nothing wrong with that either." The other children burst into applause. Ida allowed herself a big smile. The desire to laugh eased. "However," Miss Sedgwick said with new severity, "as for getting credit for what you're doing, that's quite another matter. Credit for the term will require passing an exam given by the county." Tom raised his hand. "For 8th graders. Is that what you mean, ma'am?" "For the 8th graders, certainly, but here's the choice offer. I'll keep your secret, but in return you must all take the final exam." "All," Ida said, now very serious. "All," Miss Sedgwick repeated. "Me too?" asked Mary tremulously. "You too, my dear." "I thought tests were supposed to be just for Tom and Ida," Herbert objected. "Young man, you've changed the rules here," Miss Sedgwick replied. "Now I have too. You can't get credit for taking a full term unless we see that you've truly mastered it." Miss Sedgwick asked Ida, Can I see the exam so I can make sure that I know what to teach?" "But then the results would only tell us what you taught your students, Miss Bitson, not what they know. No, my dear, just continue as you're doing. The test will allow me to see what you've accomplished. Agreed?" No one spoke. "Is that a yes or a no?" asked Miss Sedgwick. "We've been doing everything by voting," Ida said. "Then please feel free to vote," Miss Sedgwick urged. Ida stood up. "Those in favor of everybody taking the exams like Miss Sedgwick says, raise your hand." All hands except Herbert's went up. "I'm afraid," said Miss Sedgwick, "this won't work unless everyone agrees." She turned to Herbert. "Young man, would you reconsider?" "Aw," he scowled. "If I take that exam, I'm just going to fail it." "Herbert, please," Ida pleaded. Herbert stared down at his desk. Once more Ida said, "Those in favor." This time all hands, including Herbert's, rose. "Good," said Miss Sedgwick. "Then I shall be here bright and early on the morning of June the 7th to conduct the examinations. I presume for you too, Miss Bidson." "Yes, ma'am. So if you please, just give me every student's name and grade level." Ida found a piece of paper, and while the class looked on in silence, she provided the information. Miss Sedgwick took the paper, folded it up, and placed it in her purse. "I wish each and every one of you good luck," she said, and started for the door. Reaching it, she paused. "Two more things," she said. "I urge you to inform your parents and the school board about what you're doing. And Miss Bidson, do get into dry clothing before you catch your death of cold." The children waited until they heard the sound of a car driving away. "I suppose," said Ida, "we'll just have to work harder." "And there's one more thing," Herbert called out. "What's that?" "No more swimming." When Ida and Felix got home that afternoon, Ida went right into the kitchen. Her mother was at the big plank table kneading their weekly bread. "Ida," she cried, "what happened to you?" "We had some fun at school today," Ida said ruefully. Miss Bidson gave her daughter a look. "Ida, are you teaching or playing games down there?" "I'm teaching, Ma," Ida said hotly. Then she told her everything that had happened, including the unfortunate visit by Miss Sedgwick. "Now the whole school has to take exams," Ida said. "I've ruined everything." "If you had," her mother said, "that woman would have said so." "In the whole time I've been teaching," Ida said, "it was only fooling I've done. Anyway, it was fun," she pouted, "the most fun I've had in a long time." Ida, a teacher will always be held up as an example to her students. That's not fair, Ida burst out. I'm a person, too. I should study electricity like Tom, or play with a printing press. No one thinks he's bad when he's fooling. Speaking of bad, I'm afraid I have more unfortunate news, said her mother. I met Herbert Bixler's pa when your father and I were at the feed store today. He complained to me that Herbert is wasting his time going to school. Said he wants to go to the school board and complain that you're keeping the school open. He didn't. Well, perhaps he was just talking a bit big. Ma, you know what I think? I think Mr. Bixler doesn't want Herbert to come to school at all. I'm just telling you what he said. Or maybe Mr. Bixler's mad at me because I went down to his place, Ida confessed. Did you? Why? Ma, it's what teachers do. Herbert hadn't been to school. I'm supposed to find out why. You know what Mr. Bixler said? Said Herbert's schooling doesn't matter. Honey, Mr. Bixler's wife died when Herbert was a baby. Mr. Bixler's had bad luck on his farm. Lost a whole lot of sheep because of disease. Folks say his debt is piling up. He's not a happy man. Unhappy folks do unhappy things. Do you think Mr. Jordan already knows what we're doing? Ida, in this valley, sooner or later, everybody knows everything about everybody. You could tell him yourself, you know. He'd only say no. A frowning Ida sat down before the kitchen table. Is there something else? Her mother asked. Ida said nothing. Is it Tom? Ida shook her head. Can't be worse than what you've already told me, can it? Her mother coaxed. Ma, I've been working so hard at teaching. I've been letting my own studying go. Way I'm going. I'm going to be the only one failing the exam. Well, Miss Bitson, however you decide to head off that problem, I suggest you start by getting into some clean clothes.